For this project, you have a choice between the grid transfer and the origami project. So these are both drawing projects, and that's why I've given you a choice. They approach drawing in two different ways. One of them is to use the paper that I gave you, and either using the paper directions or a link on YouTube, create a paper crane, and then you will draw it like you would draw a still life. You would put it on the table and you would try to draw it from real life. Depending on your skill, that could be easy or difficult. For those of you who are not very good at drawing and this is your first time, it would be easier if you selected the grid transfer project. So one of the things I've included for you is this little cutout, and I'm gonna go ahead and cut mine out because I want you to see how I do that. I made a slit and then went in the opposite direction because what I want to do is I want to cut this out very, very carefully. And it is the exact size as the square on my sheet, okay? And you're gonna need that. So at this point, you should have watched the Zoom with me, or you should have at least gone and watched the PowerPoint that explains, you know, how to make a grid transfer. So if we were in school, I would have you make a grid. Since we're not in school, I made the grid for you, so it's perfect. Please do your very best on this paper, because if you mess up, you will have to flip it over and create your own grid. So there are 5, I'm gonna use the fish here. So I'm gonna actually cut this in half. I just like the fish because it has such a better range of value, and I like fish. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 by 5. Well, on this paper, I have 5 by 5 as well. And it's kind of like a chessboard. So if I sit here and I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I go A, B, C, D, E. I can do the same thing on my paper. Now, the only thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I'm using a pencil that, like, I'm writing low enough that I can erase. So, like, I'm going to bring this in a little bit. From far away, I don't think you'll see the numbers. And then A, B, C, D, E. Okay, now the squares match. So this square on my little paper represents this one. The 2 here is here. So it basically goes square by square. You're going to transfer this little drawing, and by the time you're done, it's going to look exactly the same, but on bigger paper. Sometimes people get confused, which is why I have this. If you are looking at this, sometimes it's hard to tell where you want to do. So I like to go square by square. So here's 1, there's nothing in it. Here's 2, here's 2. If I take this and I mark this out, okay, then I can see exactly what's supposed to go in this square because I'm thinking in regards of this little shape rather than a big one. Now, I also kind of like to mark the halfway point here, and I can even like mark it on here or make smaller squares if I'm confused. Okay, so now I know that this fits within this tiny little space. So I'm going to go ahead, and this is, you know, if this is halfway, it's a little bit more than halfway. So I'm going to go ahead and do my best to draw it in. Okay, then I'm going to move on to the next square. All right, and sometimes it's easier if you can make as many marks as you want on the fish because you're not going to see it, but this will just, you know, if I do it on my drawing, I want to do it real light. So I can start with this square so I can kind of see where it comes in. And even I might have to erase and go over it a couple times but I'm just looking at the outside edge. I don't like that one. The more accurate that I make it now, the better it's going to look in the long run. And I've said that before, like, take your time at the beginning to kind of set it up. Right now I'm just kind of like over here on that part, but I'm down too far. I think this comes up a little bit more. I'm just kind of tracing. And you're gonna have a tendency to draw it smaller than it is. Don't worry about it. So now here's 4, here's 4. Now I'm moving on to this one. It's easiest if you start out with the outline because then you can go through and fill in the squares. Like in this particular square, it's got spines. So if I really wanted to, I could go ahead and put the spines in. On the fish, it's going to be a little bit of a guessing game because there's so many of them that even if you draw them wrong, it's not going to make that big of a difference. And you have the option to do this in pencil or color pencil. Let me see. I went into 5. Okay, so see, I went into 5 and that is way off. So I'm going to erase this. And it's like barely there. So now, if we look at this first row, that's the first row, and that's the first row. Now I could really start anywhere. I could move around if I want because I have square by square. If you're struggling, you know, we're not looking at the whole picture and drawing. We're just looking at a piece of it. This is a different way to draw. It's a way to scale where you make something that's little big. We're going to do that with the other project, but in a different way. If you're someone who's very artistic and you'd like to challenge yourself, you can do both, but I'm only going to give you credit for one. I wish I could give you extra credit for both, but you won't need it. So here's D, okay? I know it's kind of, bring that down a little bit so you can see. So it's my fish face. Now I'm doing this very lightly. I'm also working in a 2B. I'm working in a heavier pencil because I want you to be able to see it. Your best bet is going to be to work in an HB. That way you can erase the best. So there's nothing in this square. I'm going to start with these little fans. Now I'm not like, these are so tiny. I'm kind of guessing. And you won't be able to tell in the end because they just kind of fan out like this. And then the fish's jaw is in here, just barely coming down and goes up into there. The eye is in this top corner. And I can make it real detailed, or I can just, you know, kind of leave it a little simple. His head comes in. And I can even break this down even more if I want. Again, I can get as little as I need to make it happen. So I know that that's too low. So I'm going to erase it. I'm going to put it back in there. Oh, I messed it up. See, I stuck. This should have gone the whole thing. So again, remember, you know, it's going to take you a minute. So this is stretching in half. So maybe I was right the first time. Because in the first time, the lips are right here at this line. There's kind of like this little thing here. I'm just going to shade that. And then his lip comes down and goes down like that. Okay, so that looks better. That's more what I'm looking for. And I'm going to erase this line that I put in. Actually, this comes over a little bit because the fish's head is a little bit more elongated. Now, when you don't have, so this has value. So I was like, this looks kind of funny. Well, it does, because I don't have any shadows to help define the face. When you color it or put in shadows, it'll make more sense. Okay. So there we go. So now I'm going to go up here to this C. I'm going to go ahead and put this in, and it just goes across. And now I'm into this one, and it continues to go across. This is about halfway. The body meets about here. It's got all these little lines. And I'll continue to go space by space until I finish the whole drawing. So just remember a couple things. Match your lines up, like match your squares up so you know what you're doing. You can move methodically, square by square. You can skip around. But if you get stuck trying to look at something, like I'm here at 4C, okay? So 4C, this square right here. Okay, that's this one. That's a lot of stuff going on in there. And so I might just wait. Like, it would be really hard to figure out all those lines. So I might just do the edge and the edge of the fish. Like, if I was gonna do that, like maybe I do up to here and then I do the outline. And then I can kind of fake that a little bit. You don't have to be as precise because there's a lot going on. The same would be if I was doing this bear. You know, I don't have to put every single tick mark. I'm gonna focus more on, like, this is a big shadow, this is some shadow. You know, my line quality to show that might look something like this, and then it might get darker. You can think of it as shapes, like his nose. You know, you'll have his nose drawn in there. Obviously, this is not perfect. Like, I'm just trying, but you'll have other tones if you put that in. You know, it's light over there. Eventually, you know, you'll end up with the inside of his nose is practically black. But then, you know, there's areas of highlights and shadows, like over here is real light. So if I erase that out, you know, you'll kind of experiment and play around with it. So I want you to either choose this project or the other one. What you do is you take this one, whichever image you select, and I want you to outline draw it first, and then I want you to send it to me.